Well, hello and welcome to the Princess Royal and Duke of Fife Memorial Park here in the village of Braemar in the Scottish Highlands. Behind me is the Duke of Rothesay Highland Games Pavilion. I'm Robert Lovey and it's a pleasure to be here today to welcome you and host this video. I'm also the very proud commentator at Braemar Gathering as well as various other Highland Games throughout Scotland. Today on this video presentation we're going to be taking you through the history of Highland Games as well as the history of the famous Braemar Gathering. I'll also be working today with Kyle Randalls. Kyle's a great heavyweight and has won many championships throughout Scotland, and he's also a great ambassador for Highland Games. But first of all, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the history of Highland Games in Scotland. Highland Games in Scotland is an integral part of our culture and our history and what it is to be Scottish in many respects by way of sportsmanship and gathering. The word gathering that is used here at Braemar is really how it started, by a gathering of people and clans and people that wanted to take part in some events by way of showing Highland sports. It goes right back to King Malcolm of Canmore, the best part of a millennium ago. And today at the Highland Games, those sports haven't changed. At the heavy sports, you'll see them throwing a hammer, putting a stone, you'll see them tossing the caber. Iconic sports, very much part of a Highland Games, but wrapped round all that activity is so many other sports. The hill race, which you see the hill of Morrone in the background here, where the famous hill race is run for Braemar Gathering. Light athletics is a great part of the day, as well as tug of war, piping, all forms of piping, from the pipe bands to solo championships, where you'll hear the wonderful champions coming and playing marches through spaes and reels, through to the real tradition of pibroch being played in the solo piping boards around a field at Highland Games. And of course, as well as Highland dancing, the elegance of Highland dancing on the boards. As well as Braemar is famous here in the Highlands of Scotland, this little village which nestles in the Cairngorm Mountains. You'll find that Scots people, when they emigrated throughout the world, took the culture of Highland Games with them. Places like North America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you'll find Highland Games throughout Europe, right up into the Baltic states. So anywhere that you go in all parts of the world, if you look around carefully, you will find that people have taken the cultures that we enjoy here in places like Braemar, are shared and enjoyed all over the world. So right behind me in the field here, of course, is the Royal Box. On the day of the gathering here at Braemar, it certainly doesn't look like that. It's dressed up to the hilt and with heather ropes and flying standards. And of course, it's where Her Majesty the Queen and members of the royal family arrive and sit into the Royal Box there to enjoy the spectacle of the Braemar Gathering in front of them. The society which runs the gathering goes back to 1815, when the Braemar Rights Society was formed. It was then in the early 1830s and around 1832 that society, which became the Braemar Highland Society, put up the prize money to start the first of the Highland Games and gatherings here for the sports. This famous gathering here has enjoyed royal patronage right through from Queen Victoria to our own Queen today and every monarch in between. That has meant so much, not only to Highland Games as they stand today by having the royal family support what they do, but of course it's so important, Highland Games and the gathering here at Braemar, to the entire area of Royal Deeside and the wider patronage of games around the world. It's right at the end of the Games season every year, so the culmination of all the sports that take part and gatherings and games around the country and around the world end up here on the first Saturday of every September, very proudly, by welcoming thousands of people into this tiny little Highland village, along with their patron, Her Majesty the Queen and members of the royal family, to enjoy the traditions of what we love as Braemar Gathering and Highland gatherings. So at the very back of me is the famous hill of Morrone, where the runners take off from this field to run the hill race at Braemar Gathering. This is right in the centre of the arena, where there's so much activity and a great crowd of people just loving every part of the sport. The Highland dancing, the tug of war, the light athletics, the jumping, and of course the solo piping boards, as well as the bands and the mass bands that come round this field. But right behind me here is where the heavy sports take place. And at this point, it's my great pleasure to hand over to my friend and a great champion, Kyle Randalls, to tell you more about these heavy sports.
Hello there, my name is Kyle Randalls. I've been competing in the heavy events for 10-15 years now. Used to have a background in athletics and sort of transitioned over. We are going to be going inside the visitor centre today and taking a wee crash course look at all the heavy events we do, the background behind them, why we do them and how we do them. The first event we're going to go over today is the shot put, or the stain putt. This is an event that has sort of transformed over the years. It's went from being a stone or a manhood stone that would either be thrown or lifted around the highlands, the glens, the lochs and the rivers. The shot put is called the shot put because you putt the cannon shot. We normally do 2 putts at each game, so you do a 16-pound putt or stone and then a 22-pound putt or stone, and at some games you'll do a Braemar stone, or a standing putt as it's called, and that can sometimes be heavier. I know at Braemar it's 27 pounds. The shot putt, we are confined to a 7'6" box. You must start with both feet inside the box and also finish with both feet inside the box, and you must stay behind the trig as you deliver the putt. The shot put, you're not really throwing it, it's more like you're pushing it. So when you're actually doing it, it'll come off your hand, more like a push than you're actually, throwing it. It's a bit of a mislabel sometimes with it being a throwing event, I suppose. The techniques you have is you have the standing putt, which is sort of most rudimental, the most basic, and it's just sheer sort of power and movement, transferal of weight from one leg to the other, and then trying to put that into a long extension of the arm. I favour the glide. So the glide is, if you imagine, to put it in rudimental terms, you're hanging your weight over your right foot, you're shooting your left leg, keeping your weight on your right leg, landing in the centre of the trig, pulling your left leg round and then transferring your weight from right to left and pushing the putt through the centre. And at the end of the day with the shot put, it's a pretty simple event. The furthest distance wins. One of the other events we will compete in any given Highland Games is the weight throw events. So we will often do the 28-pound weight for distance, that's roughly 12.5 kilograms. We also, and I don't know who came up with this event because it's a challenging one, we also throw the 56-pound weight for distance. So this one's 25 kilograms. Some of the weights we throw are just a giant link on a sort of an eyeball socket onto the weight, and that's it, there's no chain. And this one, you throw the exact same way, only it's a lot more challenging because it's heavier and it's more dense. So this one doesn't tend to go quite as far. Again though, old farm weight would have been used for, weighing produce, 56 pund as they call it, or 25 kilos, and it's the same the 28. I like to think that this event sort of came about through human nature. A load of lads working on the farm. I'm stronger than you, I'm better than you, I'm faster than you. Oh, look how far I can throw that. Oh, I can throw that further than you. This event, again, you're thrown from the inside of the box. The box we use in the weight for distance is 9 foot from trig to back. You must keep both of your feet within the box at all times whilst you're throwing. You're not allowed to put your feet over the front of the trig as you throw, or that will be a no throw. The conventional technique for the weight for distance, as it's called, will be 2 turns. You're going to do 1 turn, which starts off with you facing chest towards the trig. You're then going to sort of sprint through the centre, at least that's the mental point I normally use, and you're going to try and spin around in a circle, land at the front, facing the direction you're going to throw, and then you want to have like a long pull on it, trying to beat the weight in and make the weight do the work. So one of the other events which is my personal favourite is the Scots hammer. This, similar to the shot put, is a 16 pound and a 22 pound hammer normally on a 4'2" shaft of wood. The shot put is now what is on the hammerhead. It's sort of bored out and there is a shaft inserted through it. Wood of choice nowadays is Malacca cane, which comes from sort of the far Asia area, Malaysia, Indonesia, places like this. One of the reasons this sort of came about was you had Scottish troops stationed there during World War II, during the colonial era. They would often take their culture over there, our culture, the Highland Games, and they would compete over there. This event over the years has sort of came to be from men in a field, again, human nature taking over. I'm better than you, I'm stronger than you, I can throw it further than you. And one thing you'll see pretty much every competitor wearing is boots. Now, they're simply called hammer boots, there's nothing fancy about them. These are a set of quite often hill walking boots that have a long blade drilled into the bottom of them, and if you imagine it acts as like an anchor, you kick these into the ground and it allows you to lean back and really put more momentum into it without essentially falling over. The technique for the hammer is very basic. This is what gave birth to the Olympic hammer, the hammer you see at the Olympics when they're spinning around with it. You've got the 7.26 kilo or 16 pound hammer. If you're right-handed, you'll put it out to one side. You have your back facing against the trig. Most people will swing the hammer 3 times from a dead start to the side. You're going to go round your head. I personally like to start off slowly and sort of go through the gears and move up in momentum. Some people will just swing and go hell for leather. You swing it around your head 3 times, and then what you're going to do is release it behind you. The same as the other throwing events, when you throw you must stay behind the trig. You're only allowed to go round the trig or past the trig once the hammer has hit the ground. You'll also see when we're throwing the hammer, we'll use what's called resin on our hands, and we'll also put some of that on the hammer shaft. If you imagine this acts as essentially a glue, and it means that you don't have to death grip this thing as you're swinging it, you can kind of relax a bit more and put a bit more momentum into actually finessing it and working the speed through it. And like most events here, it's pretty simple. It's the furthest throw wins. The creme de la creme event, the event that most people come to Highland Games to see, is the caber. The caber, if you imagine it, is essentially a giant piece of wood that has been debarked, dried out a little bit, and sometimes treated just to try and extend its life. It can be any size, and each Highland Games has their own caber. They don't even have to be made out of the same sort of wood. They will be anything from, say, 16 foot to maybe 21, 22 foot. The weight on them will vary from, say, maybe 100 pounds to 180 pounds. Sometimes cabers are even bigger. I like to believe that the caber came about through man's intuition or laziness. For example, you'd maybe have felled some trees, you'd be carrying them maybe back to your croft or to your farm, and you'd come across a river. Now, you could wade through the river and carry it. You couldn't obviously throw the caber in the river, it would drift downstream, which could be an advantage in certain circumstances. But if you were to pick the tree up, or the caber, and hold it and throw it and run it the river and toss it, land it as we do in competition and land it on the far bank, you could then wade through the river and just pull the caber out the other side. You will get the caber given to you and you'll present your feet in a sort of V shape. The caber will then be put against your feet, and normally one of your competitors will actually lift it up for you and they'll place it against your sort of neck. You'll then sort of bear hug it, and we'll put that resin that I mentioned earlier on the back of your hands, and the idea is that you stick your hands together on the far side of the caber. You're then going to work your way down to the bottom, and you have to do almost like a scooping motion. You'll pick it up, and then it's going to sit against your neck. There's then this weird phenomenon that I can't really explain. It's something you kind of need to feel. There'll be a split second where it feels like there's no weight, and it just feels like you're sort of holding something. That's where you sort of want to be when you start really running with it. And as you're sprinting, the caber will go from sitting slightly behind your sort of body to moving on centre with it and then going in front of you. As it hits that point where it's in front of you, there's this moment where you need to heave. And when you heave, you want to pull both your arms and finish above your head. You want to put all the momentum into what's called the light end, or the tapered end, which is where it's curved round so you can hold it, and you want to flip that over itself whilst the cable lands on the perpendicular and falls down perfectly straight. So the cable will go through the perpendicular and you want it landing at 12 o'clock, which is perfectly straight and is a perfect toss. No one can beat you if you do that, they can only tie with you. If the cable does not land at 12, which is often the case for myself, I'm afraid, you'll be judged on minutes past from 12 o'clock to quarter past, or 12 o'clock to quarter to. The idea is that you're in the centre of the clock, if you imagine you're in the centre of it, and the hands are your minutes. The judge who actually judges your time will be running behind you, and they will actually judge you from directly behind as to where the cable initially lands and where it ends up with the head facing. If you're sadly not able to get it through the perpendicular, it will be judged from side on by a side judge who will judge you in degrees from 0 to 90. The caber is a spectacle event, I won't lie, it's not my particular favourite, but it is the grand one of the day. One of the only events that we throw at the games for height is the 56-pound weight. It's the exact same rules as modern high jump, but you're not jumping over the bar, you're throwing a weight over it. And when you are doing this, what you will see a lot of competitors doing is they will roll up their kilt. So the kilt will be rolled up, you'll sort of tuck it into your belt or your hip, and the idea is that you can plant your hand on your leg that you've rolled up, and you can also swing the weight between your legs without catching your kilt. This must be thrown in one hand. It's normally the dominant hand of the person. If you're right-handed, use your right. If you're left, use your left. You will start off with your back sort of facing the bar. You'll stand almost underneath it, only slightly forward. And if you imagine like a kettlebell swing, it's probably what most people would relate it to. You sort of swing it down through your legs. Some people will swing it a few times and sort of set themselves up. I personally go for one swing or just start from a dead and sort of pull it. You're going to put it between your legs and then you're going to swing it as high as you can, throw it above your head, finishing with the arm sort of behind you, nice and high, going through the full range of motion. And then ideally when everything clicks, everything aligns, if you imagine the bar's sitting, the weight will just edge over the top of it and come down on the other side. The history of this, again, I like to go back to young men or whoever was working on the farms. You'd have the 56-pound weight, an old weight used for weighing farm produce. They'd be lying around. The usual test or the usual patter would be thrown around. I'm stronger than you, I'm better than you. Oh well, if you're stronger than me, throw this weight over, say, that barn beam or that tree branch. You'd throw it over, the next person would throw it over, you'd maybe swap a branch. At each height on this, as it increases, you get 3 attempts, and the height will constantly increase, normally in increments of 6 inches or a foot, or perhaps more if there's some competent people in the competition. And it will continue getting higher until there is only one person left, and then they will be declared the winner.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video presentation today about the history of Highland Games. We've enjoyed being at Braemar, but in particular about the heavies, the heavy sports. We hope that you've been inspired by what you've seen today, the history of Highland Games, and in particular watching Kyle Randalls explain so much about those heavy sports. But wherever you are, we hope that we've inspired you to take part or simply come along as a spectator and enjoy the wonderful traditions that we all enjoy with our Highland Gatherings and Highland Games. And we certainly hope to welcome you here to Braemar or anywhere around the world to enjoy Highland Games.